The devil has a name. You know it. Lucifer. It's on album covers and in horror films and whispered in sermons. Here's the strange part. That name was never his. It appears exactly once in the entire Bible, one verse. And in that verse, it isn't even talking about the devil. It's talking about a king. A human king from Babylon who got too proud and fell. The most famous name for the most feared being in history is, more or less, a translation accident. And once you pull that one thread, the whole picture starts to come apart. Because the devil you're picturing right now, the red skin, the horns, the pitchfork, the ruler of hell, the great cosmic enemy of God, that figure was not handed down to us complete. He was assembled, slowly, over centuries. Let me show you where he actually came from. When most of us hear the word Satan, one image loads automatically. The enemy, the opposite of God, a fallen angel who rebelled, got thrown out of heaven, and now runs a kingdom of fire somewhere downstairs. It's a clean story. Good versus evil. 2 thrones, 2 kingdoms, 1 war. There's only one problem. If you open the oldest parts of the Hebrew Bible looking for that character, he isn't there. Not the way you picture him. Not even close. In the original Hebrew, the word is Satan. And it's not a name, it's a job. Satan means adversary, an accuser, someone who stands against you, often in a legal sense. Think prosecutor. That's why in those early texts, it almost always appears with a little word in front of it. Ha-Satan, the Satan, the accuser, a role, a title, not a person's name. And here's the part that stops people cold. In the book of Job, the most famous appearance of the Satan in the whole Hebrew Bible, he isn't God's enemy at all. He's a member of God's court, one of the heavenly staff. He walks in among the sons of God, reports for duty, and, this is the uncomfortable bit, he can't lay a finger on Job without God's permission. He has to ask, and God grants it. He's not running a rival kingdom. He's closer to the prosecuting attorney in God's own courtroom. The adversary, sure. But God's adversary? No. If anything, God's employee. Now, you can actually watch the change happen, inside the Bible itself. There's a story where King David takes a census he wasn't supposed to take. In the older telling, the book of 2 Samuel, who incites him to do it? God does. Plainly, God does. Then there's a later telling. The book of 1 Chronicles retells the exact same event, centuries afterward. And this time it's not God who incites David, it's Satan. Same story, same king, same census. But somewhere in the gap between those 2 books, the blame quietly moved, off of God and onto a new character who could carry it. That is not a small detail, that's a fingerprint. You are watching a figure get promoted in real time, from a role to a rival. So what happened in between? Where does a courtroom prosecutor pick up a kingdom of his own? A lot of it traces back to one enormous event, the exile. The Jewish people were conquered, carried off to Babylon, and then lived for generations under the Persian Empire. And Persia had a religion, Zoroastrianism, built around something the Hebrew faith had never really emphasized, a cosmic war. One good god of light, one evil spirit of darkness, locked in battle across the whole of history. Many scholars argue this is where the dualism seeps in, the idea of a single, supreme force of evil standing against a single, supreme force of good. The Hebrew tradition walked into that world carrying an accuser who worked for God. It walked out, generations later, carrying the seeds of an enemy who worked against him. Then comes the part nobody preaches about, the roughly 400 years between the Old Testament and the New. The Bible, as most people have it, goes quiet here, but the writers didn't go quiet. This is exactly when the backstory gets written. Texts from this stretch, books like 1st Enoch, start filling in the lore. Angels who fell, watchers who came down from heaven and corrupted the earth, a whole population of demons, with names, with ranks, with a leader at the top. And none of that, the rebellion, the fall, the war in heaven, none of it comes from Genesis. There's no fallen angel in the garden. There's a talking serpent, and the text never once calls it Satan. The dramatic origin story comes from here, the in-between, The deleted scenes of the Second Temple period, if you'll forgive me. So by the time the New Testament opens its first page, the character is already fully built. Now there's a ruler of demons, a tempter out in the wilderness, a prince of this world. The accuser has finally, completely become the enemy. Which brings us all the way back to the name, Lucifer. Open a King James Bible to Isaiah chapter 14. There it is. How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? Sounds like the devil's origin story, doesn't it? The fall from heaven. It gets quoted that way from 1,000 pulpits, but read the verses right around it, because Isaiah tells you in plain words exactly who he's talking about. It's a taunt, a victory poem aimed at the king of Babylon, the empire that had just crushed Jerusalem. Isaiah is standing over a fallen tyrant and mocking him. You told yourself you'd climb up past the stars, and look at you now. The Hebrew word is Hallel. It means shining one, morning star, Venus, the bright planet that rises just before dawn, blazing, and then gets swallowed the moment the sun comes up. A perfect image for a king who rose high and then crashed. Centuries later, a scholar named Jerome translated the Bible into Latin, and for morning star, he used the ordinary everyday Latin word for it, Lucifer, lowercase. It simply means light bringer. The Romans used it for the planet Venus. It was about as mystical as the word sunrise. Then, more than 1,000 years after that, the King James translators came through, kept Jerome's Latin word, and capitalized it, Lucifer. And just like that, a description of a planet hardened into a proper name for the devil. And here's the irony that should make you put your cup down. That exact same title, the morning star, is given in the New Testament to Jesus. The book of Revelation calls Christ the bright and morning star. So the most feared name for Satan and one of the most tender names for Christ are the same phrase, the same image. One of them just got translated into a monster. Now let me be clear about what I am not saying. I am not telling you that evil isn't real. Anyone who's watched the news for 10 minutes knows that it is. And I'm not here to pull anything out from under your faith. What I'm saying is narrower than that, and I think it actually matters more. The character, the horns, the pitchfork, the throne of fire, the name Lucifer, that wasn't lowered down from heaven finished and complete. It was built, layer by layer, by an exile, by an empire, by a Latin translation and an English capital letter, and by the very old, very human need to give a face to the things that hurt us. And there is something almost freeing in that, because a being you were taught to be afraid of your entire life turns out to have a paper trail, a history, edit marks, and things that have a history can be understood instead of only feared. The accuser became the adversary became the enemy picked up a planet's name and a kingdom of fire. But none of it fell from the sky. People wrote it down, which means people are allowed to read it back, honestly and without flinching. That's not the end of your faith. For a lot of people, it's the first honest look they've ever let themselves take.